Hello everyone joining us today for this webinar presented and hosted by Surgical House Australia, titled The NDIS and Home Tube Feeding, What to Include and more importantly, How to Make Sure You Get It. My name is Serge Bellardi and I'm the National Business Manager for Surgical House. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands on which we are meeting today. As we are meeting virtually, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands where each of us are located and pay my respects to elders past and present. I also extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. I'd like to introduce you a little bit about Surgical House first. Surgical House is a family-owned Australian business established in 1980 in Western Australia. We are a wholesale and retail supplier of healthcare consumables and equipment distributed Australia-wide. We pride ourselves on a business on a reputation of excellent service, mutual trust and reliability. As you can see by the slide here, we are here to help and make the NDIS journey easier for both participants and providers. And we do provide caring, knowledgeable, reliable service, offering peace of mind to people with disability, their families and carers. We do sell the complete suite of healthcare consumables, ranging from continence, enteral feeding, obviously, which is the main topic today, right through to daily living aids. We truly are a one-stop shop for all things consumables and equipment. We have many points of difference. We are obviously a one-stop solution. We provide free quotations for evidence gathering and better NDIS plan outcomes. And this point around quotes is something that we'll focus on heavily later on today. And it'll be a feature today about how to get those right outcomes for your tube fed participants. We provide advice. We have an easy online ordering system. We ship into all the major cities in Australia via 2 warehouses, both in Perth and in Melbourne. And for most of our participants, especially someone like a tube-fed customer, we end up being freight-free because most of our orders, if they're above $250, there is no freight charges into those major cities. If you've seen us on social media, you'll notice that we're very active when it comes to training, education and events in the community sector, both in disability and in aged care. We've recently built a large training hub in Western Australia, which we're constantly doing networking and education events. We're now duplicating those sort of events into Sydney and into Melbourne. We have a major training day coming up in Perth next month and shortly after in Sydney. If you would like to be part of those training days, which do include nutrition, and from some of our speakers here today, please inquire, get on our database, and we'll send you out the other links for those. I'd like to start off today with introducing someone who probably doesn't need an introduction. She is an advanced accredited practicing dietitian and tube specialist, but it is her love and drive to get the best experience and outcomes for her tube participants that is truly intoxicating. Those of you who've ever met her would know what I'm talking about. Please welcome Lina Breik.
Thanks so much. I promise you I did not give Serge those words to say about me. So much, Serge. I'm so excited to be here. I'm hoping the 40 people dialing in aren't sick of me because I know we had a few events running at Feeding Tube Awareness Week. But I really hope today I at least can share your struggles with the NDIS. So I'm just going to share my screen. Here it is. I've got 3 screens and I don't know which one's screen 2 or screen 3, but I think this is good now. So I'm going to share with you all 5 secrets, right? Before I do that though, I'm going to acknowledge something which I think the dietitians on the line, but also the support coordinators and providers, other clinicians, I hear you guys. It's hard. It's been really hard for us NDIS providers. And I think in particular, from a dietetics lens since the 3rd of October, 2024, when the changes have kicked in. The secrets I'm going to share with you today are things that I think have helped me work in this system and navigate the system. But if you speak to me 6 months from now, those 5 secrets are probably going to be completely different. It's important to acknowledge that this is an evolving landscape, and it is so important that we gather like this and talk about these things, talk about our struggles, some tips and tricks. So please be interactive. Please jot down any thoughts you've got in the chat. We're here to all learn from each other. Here are my 5 takeaways, right? Number one, and I'm going to go through each of these in a lot of detail, build relationships with community suppliers. Number two, know your equipment. And I mean this from a dietitian perspective, but also from a support coordinator or planner perspective, right? If I was a coordinator or planner, don't just accept quotes from clinicians that you might not understand. Actually go, why does this person need all this equipment for their tube fitting? It's okay to question, because that will help you at the meeting, at that plan review meeting where the clinicians aren't available. So know your equipment, and that applies to everybody. Formula trials, right? So for the dietitians on the line, for me, I worked in 12 years across several Victorian hospitals. In the last 5 years, I've primarily been in the NDIS community space. And formula trials are possible, dietitians, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how I navigated that space. Calling for a plan review as a clinician, but also as a coordinator or a plan manager, you've got a right to do that. And I'll talk a little bit about how I've navigated that. And remembering that quality of life equipment is probably more reasonable and necessary than the clinical stuff. That's a controversial statement, but working in the community, I definitely have felt that quality of life equipment stuff we need to include, right? So for those of you, before I go through those 5 secrets, just a really quick brief about tube feeding for those who don't know much about it. It's indicated for anyone who cannot meet their nutrition or hydration, okay? I've got clients who are eating through their mouth but have a feeding tube for water and medication, okay? And that's okay. They still need equipment, and these people are out there and they still need the exact same support. Some examples of medical conditions, and this is by no means exhaustive. This is just me spitting out 4 common conditions that I see in my clients. And long-term feeding tubes, right, tend to protrude from the stomach, and those are mainly the ones that are inserted in individuals or home tube fed. There are types of tubes that start in the nose, and I'm going to show you with my little teddy bear. These are nasogastrics. These are short-term feeding tubes, which are often popped in for people in hospitals. So you won't find a lot of these in the community, but they still do exist, especially in kids. I'm not a pediatric dietitian, so I won't speak too much about that. But the main types of long-term feeding tubes you're going to see are the low-profile buttons, so the ones in the doggy right here, or the dangler standard feeding tubes, right? The ones in Peggy the Penguin. So now, on the other thing I want to cover, sorry, before I move on to the secrets, is this question that I often see pop up in the tube feeding space. Does the NDIS cover tube feeding equipment? And it's a really big fat yes, okay? Please know that it is a big fat yes. And the important thing to remember is that Medicare, right? So the PBS scheme, the Medicare scheme, does not cover tube feeding equipment. And for dietitians on the line, I know you guys know this, but actually include that sentence in your letters. It's powerful to say these tube feeding supplies need to be covered by an NDIS plan because they're actually not covered by Medicare, right? So explicitly saying that is helpful. And in terms of the public hospital home enteral nutrition programs, I know some of you on the line know about these. Some support coordinators have said to me, NDIS won't cover the tube feeding supplies because the patient can go on to the HEN program of the local hospital. Remember, local hospitals have certain criteria to who they allow into their state-funded HEN programs, right? And often the NDIS, which is federal funded scheme, the public state hospitals do not cover those clients. Okay, so please jump on the NDIS website if you have any doubt and just type in NDIS enteral feeding in Google. and you will see that the NDIS does cover lots of things related to tube feeding, including, excitingly, a registered nurse to actually train your support workers or your carers that are supporting someone with a feeding tube. All right, so I just wanted to make sure everybody on the line knows a brief view of tube feeding and knows for sure that NDIS does cover equipment. Now on to our 5 secrets. One of the biggest one I want to pass on to everybody is building relationships with community suppliers. As you can see from this webinar and others I've done, I've got a very strong relationship with Surgical House. What that's done for me, it's allowed me to, if I've got a client that's got uncommon tube feeding equipment, I just shoot an email off to Surgical House and say, you guys don't have this on your website. Can you source it so that my client can order this on a monthly basis? So because I've got that strong relationship, I'm able to ask these things, and it's really empowering for me and the client, and reduces my stress. Accurate costing of consumables. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more and show you an example in the next slide. But having a strong relationship with a community supplier allows you to get those accurate quotes. I've said this before in other presentations. Hospital dietitians and community dietitians, I don't think we should be doing quotes, right? We don't know the most up-to-date pricing. We don't know how much delivery is going to cost. We need accurate quotes when we're submitting for NDIS reviews. So please reach out to community suppliers, and if you have a relationship with one, they'll be able to generate these quotes for you for free, right? Having that close connection is really, really empowering. And then normally I supplement that quote with a letter of support. Customized troubleshooting is something that's been really helpful for me. So if I've had a client that hasn't received their delivery on time, their stock's been received and expires in a month, these issues happen, right? Having a relationship with a community supplier, you're able to customize that troubleshooting. Pick up the phone and go, hey, Renee, these are the issues that my client's having. Can you please call them and sort it out? And I've personally been able to work very closely with Surgical House in that aspect, and it's been really empowering for me and my clients. And assistance with NDIS sorts of claims, we've already spoken about that. So in terms of the quotes, for some of you that follow me on LinkedIn, and if you don't, please connect with me. I love social media and I love to connect with you all. I posted this a while ago where I had honestly done a little bit of an experiment myself. My client needed a quote for these 4 things, right? A formula, a fiber-containing formula, a low-profile feeding tube device, some syringes and extension sets. And I found that when I did the quote myself, I got a total of about $9,000 a year. When I had asked Surgical House to spit a quote out for me, they got around $12,000. And this was a little experiment I did on my own, just very quickly. But that $3K difference really, really shocked me. So hospital dietitians and community dietitians, please reach out to your community suppliers, build a relationship with one, and get them to do those free quotes for you, and you work on that letter of support, that dreadful letter of support, which I know all of us are struggling to write persuasive ones, no matter how dramatic they are, but we'll get there together. Number 2, knowing your equipment, right? Dietitians and also support coordinators, I encourage you guys to know your equipment too. This is an example of a feeding tube, obviously taken in my personal studio and my phone. This is a standard dangler feeding tube that's got a port for feeding in it. This one's a low profile feeding tube device. There's a very big difference between these two, okay? In the way the way they operate, daily care and all that sort of stuff. So as a dietitian and as a support coordinator, you want to make sure you know exactly what type of tube your client has, and please build in at least 2 spare tubes into their NDIS plans. I know Surgical House and other community suppliers do stock a lot of these tubes. And if you don't find something on the website, this is where you shoot them an email and you go, these are the details of my client's feeding tube. I want to build in 2 spare tubes into their NDIS quote. Can you get these tubes in? right? And this is the sort of help that they can support you with. These two here are extension sets. So for the low profile button tubes that sit on the abdomen like a button, for you to feed through them, you need an extension set to connect with them. Now, just to stress y'all out even more, these extension sets differ. As you can see, one of them is right angled. You can't see my mouse, but one of them is right angled at the bottom, that little beige port, and the other tube extension set has a straight connector, right? So there's a big difference between right angled connector and straight connector. And when you're asking Surgical House to write you a quote for a client, you've got to specify, hey, I need extension set, a bolus extension set, right angle connector, right? So make sure your quotes are accurate in the equipment you're requesting. This only makes your quotes and your letter of support more credible to NDIS and empowers your client to go, no, I actually need these things and this is how often I use them. With extension sets, so those two on either side of the button profile, they need to be changed almost every 2 weeks. Some clients more often, some clients less often, but the manufacturers, I know we've got one of them on the line today that I think they say 2-week change for the extension sets. But as a dietitian and a support coordinator, right, when you're asking a community supplier to draft you a quote, you'll need to specify the equipment, but also how often your client uses them. So that, the annual quote is as accurate as possible, right? And yes, it does mean an additional phone call to the client sometimes, and a lot of us are short on time, but accuracy is key, right? Giving sets have so many features. They stress me out. Some are bottle cap, like this one in the photo. Some are spike capped. Some have a drip chamber, and some don't. So I need you to understand your equipment, right? I call up the client sometimes. I go, I'm trying to, put together a list of all the exact equipment so that Surgical House can spit out a quote for me. Can you send me a photo of the packaging of your giving set? Some exist with a medication port, some have no medication port. That detail is important. Yes, pricing may not be drastically different between the giving sets, but again, credibility and accuracy only pushes our case forward. Really briefly, I'm going to show you, right, for the coordinators on the line, I want to empower you with the knowledge of what kind of equipment. You might have 2 tube-fed clients, right? And you might go, the equipment the dietitian's requesting is drastically different for one client and the other. This is what I want to show you. For example, this particular client is on home tube-fed blends. So the formula that they're on, they make it at home, right? They administer these blends via syringe gravity, okay? So that means all they need from an NDIS quote perspective for an annual quote would be the appropriate syringe sizes and a blender. Potentially even a portable blender if they're quite active in the community and they want to be blending any meals on the go. This client, right, is on a particular formula that they hang attached to an IV pole and it drips with gravity. So now they need a lot of equipment. They're going to need the formula. They're going to need a pole or something similar like the free arm to actually hold the formula bottle. They're going to need a giving set, so something that connects from the formula bottle to the feeding tube. And the giving set's going to need particular features like a drip chamber, okay? Plus, they're going to need syringes to flush with water. So I'm just trying to demonstrate for you the difference in equipment and how personalized it needs to be. This third client is on overnight feeds. They're on a pump that operates for 50 ml an hour for 12 hours from 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. to 6 a.m. So they're going to need a pump, giving sets, the ones that connect from the formula to the tube. They're going to need syringes and they're going to need formula. So 3 cases of tube-fed individuals, all potentially with the same disability, but completely different feeding regimens. So dietitians are crucial to actually inform you what kind of personalized equipment they need. And then you on the other end as a support coordinator, I do think it's important for you to understand these differences because you're the one at that plan review table, not us. Okay, number 3, I'm going to go a little bit faster. Formula trials. What I mean by that, NDIS tubies in the community have a right to try before they buy. So if I've got someone that's just come out of hospital on a particular tube-fed formula, and now 3 months down the track, I want to change their formula because I think there's one that's a little bit more appropriate for them now that they're at home. It might be a fiber-containing formula. It might be something completely different to what they were on in hospital. It's important that the client tries the formula before they spend their NDIS funds purchasing this new formula that I want them to move to. So for the dietitians on the line, remember that formula companies are so important here. And I really hope you all know your local company reps at the 4 formula companies that we've got in Australia. Okay, because majority of companies actually allow free formula stock for a 3-day trial. Okay, so it wouldn't be something I would liaise with Surgical House with. I wouldn't go to Surgical House and say, can you give me 3 days worth of free formula to try on a client, make sure they tolerate. It's something I would go to the primary formula company. Okay, so for the dietitians on the line, I often get asked, how I go about navigating formula changes. This is how I do it. I've got strong relationships with the company reps. I keep them close by on speed dial, literally. And they're often extremely happy to come to the table. And some of them even drive to my clients' homes and drop the formulas off. So it's important that NDIS tubies, just like hospital-based tubies, have the opportunity to try new formula. It's important as dietitians that we experiment with different formulas to help our clients reach their maximum well-being. And this is some of the ways you can get about it. We're almost at the end. Calling for a plan review. As you change, right? As you change your formula, your feeding regimen, perhaps you're changing your client's tube type, right? Costs on an annual basis would increase and decrease accordingly. Don't be afraid to call for a plan review. For the coordinators on the line, if a dietitian says, I need a plan review because this client's on a completely new tube feeding regimen to what they were on 6 months ago, it makes sense, right? Because costs can really differ. I'm going to show you an example of costs increasing. So for example, if a client was on an old standard dangler tube that dangles out of the belly, they don't need extension sets when they go for a meal time. But if they've changed the type of feeding tube they're on to a button low profile that sits on the abdomen, they're going to require extension sets to attach. Now, those extension sets come at a pretty hefty price, right? $200 for 5 extension sets. And each one lasts a fortnight. I suck at math, but over a year, that makes a very big difference compared to someone on a dangler tube that doesn't need extension sets. So, dietitian, I would expect you to go, hey, this is how their NDIS quote will change. And coordinator, this is why it makes sense. I hope I'm making sense. It's so hard with these virtual consults. Virtual webinars. Examples of costs decreasing. You've got a client on an old feeding regimen, right? That's got a pump, empty containers, an IV pole, a giving set. And as a dietitian, you've revised their new feeding plan to have smaller formula bottles, no empty containers, no giving sets. They're only using a syringe to feed, no more IV pole, no more pump. That's a huge decrease in the annual cost. Again, I would be informing the coordinator, hey, I've just changed their whole tube feeding regimen to now be a lot simpler, without a pump, without a giving set, without empty containers, without an IV pole, and that's going to change their funding. And this is how it's going to change it. And this is where I would liaise with this likes of Surgical House and go, can you redraft a quote for me? I'm planning to resubmit. This little table here is just one that I posted recently on my LinkedIn to show this exact old, so the current feeding regimen compared to the new. So for those particular dietitians, happy for you to, I don't know, I think the recording of this will happen, will be sent around, so you can look at the nitty gritty there. But yeah, but I hope I'm getting my message across. My final point, quality of life. This one's a fun point. I'll stop being so aggro and passionate. Funky bags, right? Have a think about this sort of stuff, please, for your NDIS quotes. Hospital dietitians, if I've got you on the line, I know you guys, I was a hospital dietitian for 12 years. I know it's where you'd be drowning in inpatient work, and then you've got NDIS knocking on your door to draft a quote and a set of equipment. I hear you. It's a lot. My advice for the hospital dietitians on the line would be find a community dietitian that you feel comfortable and who is capable of supporting tube-fed clients quick, and then engage them to actually work with the NDIS coordinator to do all this sort of quoting stuff. Or number two, directly liaise with a community supplier yourself to actually spit out some of these quotes for you, and make sure you're remembering to include this sort of stuff. The quality of life, the backpacks, the stoma pads, the not so ugly IV poles, like the Freearm, which I personally love, and I've got one on my study desk that holds my phone when I'm recording videos. But yes, that's it for me. I hope I haven't gone too fast.
Thanks, Lina. That was amazing as always. So much useful information in that piece. Everyone, Lina will be here to the end. Obviously, we'll have a question time with all our speakers at the end of this presentation. So we come to our next speaker now. I'd like to introduce you to Kirsten Harris, who is the National Nurse Manager at Nutricia. And she's been a cornerstone of Nutricia's healthcare services for over 20 years. She's played a key role in managing Nutricia's national nurse team, ensuring high standards of professional nursing care, especially in enteral feeding. Her efforts have significantly enhanced patient safety and clinical effectiveness. Over to you, Kirsten.
Thank you very much, Serge, and thank you, Lina. So good morning, good afternoon to everybody. My name is Kirsten Harris and I'm the National Nurse Manager at Nutricia. Today I'm going to give you an overview of our nutrition nursing service, and the objective of this session is to demonstrate how to utilise our complementary nursing service when formulating your NDIS enteral feeding plans for your participants. So just some background here, our nursing service has been around and established for 27 years in Australia. And we are a team of 9 registered nurses covering every state and providing clinical support and education to enterally feeding patients. So anybody that has a feeding tube in place, we help to support and fast track their discharge from hospital into the home environment. And we also support people that work to clinically support those patients and anyone really within their circle of care. Collaborating with healthcare professionals who prescribe Nutricia products and those writing NDIS plans is a crucial component of our role as well. And particularly in terms of feeding tube compatibility, giving set compatibility, and also navigating the complexities of equipment. It is a minefield for many people, and we hope to try and make that process a lot smoother with the clinical support that's offered from our nutrition nurses. The nurses, they're very, very knowledgeable in terms of the equipment required for enteral feeding, and they can provide you with some really bespoke guidance on ensuring that all necessary items that are needed within the plan and the correct quantities of those items are actually accounted for. So You know, when you're thinking about giving sets, like Lina said, you're thinking about feeding tubes, but also for those patients that might have replaceable feeding tubes in the community, it's really, really important to consider other things like your dressing packs, like your saline, like your lubrication jelly, you know, those sorts of things that are essential to the tube changing procedure itself. And our nurses will offer the guidance and appropriate usage times of those products. So it's really important to adhere to manufacturers' guidelines, but also to comply with the Therapeutic Goods Administration regulations. And then this ensures that the equipment is used in its optimal condition and thereby supporting the safety and quality and effectiveness for your participants. In terms of Nutricia products, on my next slide, let's just start with an overview of what those products look like. So many of you will already be familiar with the oral nutritional range of products. They're great products, and you know, quite often dietitians will prescribe the oral nutritional supplements for bolus feeding, and you can see there on the screen the 46 compact protein range as well. Underneath, you can see the extensive range of the tube feeding bottles, and also you'll see the feeding pumps and the accessories like the Go frames and also the backpacks as well. So the backpacks and the Go frames are intended to keep our participants on the go, particularly helpful for mobile patients. And yeah, they're a really useful piece of kit, similar to the slide where Lina had shared the backpacks there. All of those products as well, they are available via Surgical House, and we do work in very close collaboration with Surgical House as well to supply your products to your participants. And it's important to note that our complimentary access to our nutrition nursing service is provided to all participants that are using these Nutricia products that you see on the slide. On my next slide, in terms of FlowCare medical devices, you'll see here our brand new feeding pump, which has gone to launch only last year. And yeah, look, it's a fantastic feeding pump, and it's called the Infinity 3, and it's a very lightweight pump that's equipped with various features designed to personalise the user's experience. So quite often you may have some of your participants potentially feeding on a different plan or a different regime during the day to what they may be feeding at night time. So this is quite an intuitive brand new pump that can help support those altering regimes. Our nurses can help you select the appropriate equipment and the pump, depending on, you know, what options are available for the patient. So it's really important to get it right in terms of the compatibility, and that's where our nursing service can really help to step up and help you in your decision making there by making some informed choices. In terms of the feeding pump as well, there's a really great online interactive pump training simulator. So that's accessible to anybody. And I very highly recommend that you jump online and you have a look at www.nutritiaflowcare.com. It's a really great practical simulator. And when you are using it, you have the ability to have a tutorial. You can go through a self-test module, and then you also have the capability to print out a certificate at the very end of the session. So it's really great to show back to even your own workplaces that you've completed your training online, as well as, you know, having support from nutrition nurses if you choose to reach out to them for face-to-face education. So my next slide just details a little more around the nutrition nursing service and how you can reach out to our nursing service. And importantly, we tend to receive a lot of our referrals via a dietitian initially, or another healthcare professional that may be managing that patient from a dietetic viewpoint or a nutrition viewpoint. It doesn't stop there because, you know, our support is not just for hospital, transfer of hospital and supporting patients in the home, but most importantly, as Lina had mentioned, tube feeding can be initiated in a community environment. So it is really important to know that those support services and the complementary access to the nursing service is also there if the participant is initiated on enteral feeding in the community. But there are many ways to connect with our nutrition nursing team. You can connect with them by phone or by email, and we also run quite a lot of virtual updates and virtual education sessions as well on a needs basis if you are reaching out and we identify that it might be easier to connect with you virtually. That way we can show you the different types of giving sets, again, to help inform you make the right choices for your participants' plan. On the next slide, it's just some detail here of our Nutricia Nurse Connect nursing service. And we actually interact with NDIS participants, their carers, via a Nutricia at Home app. And this is a very secure app that's intended to have a two-way connection, and it's a very easy process to set the person up on connecting with us. And it just allows for real-time check-ins, trainings, and for clinical troubleshooting via video calls. Next slide is just around the available resources that are at hand. So, it's really important that after, I guess, a training session, you can leave some really valuable resources with your participants and their caregivers. So on the next slide, you'll see the plethora of resources that are available, and our nurses will either send them through electronically or print them off and give them to participants in person. And they're just really handy go-to guides and help you familiarise yourself as well with the compatibility of such equipment. The last slide that I've got here is how you can contact the nutrition nursing service. So you might like to take a screenshot of this screen, but it's a really, really comprehensive slide there, just detailing the operating hours and how to reach out and contact the nutrition nursing service. So in general, we work from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. on weekdays, and then from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. on weekends and also public holidays. So 7 days a week, they're here to support you with your decision making. And just finally, in summary, the nutrition nursing service, we are here to help support you to understand the complexities of enteral feeding equipment. And please reach out if you need any guidance or support on choosing the correct equipment for your plans. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. And I can vouch that the nursing service provided by Nutricia is quite amazing because it provides so much peace of mind to families and participants in the home, especially when they're released from hospital. It limits so many trips to the hospital, and we'll cover that later on, what that all means. So thanks for that, Kirsten. Next up, we've got Avanos Digestive Health. So we've got Fiona Malloy, who is the Territory Manager for Avanos Digestive Health. She's based in WA, but she looks after WA, South Australia, Northern Territory. Originally a dental nurse that has been working in many sectors of the medical device industry. Since joining the Avanos Digestive Health team in 2021, a large proportion of her time involves delivering educational content about Avanos enteral feeding products to healthcare professionals, carers, and patients. She has a passion for quality of life and ensuring that people get to live their very best lives.
Thanks for that.
Thanks, Fiona.
Introduction, Serge. Yeah, my name's Fiona and I'm the Digestive Health Territory Manager for Avanos for WA. Today I just wanted to briefly discuss with you the types of Avanos products and the volumes you should be including in your annual quotes for your NDIS. If you could just go on to the next slide. So just before we begin, a little bit of a disclaimer. The information I'm giving is typical in nature, but as you all know, we're all individuals and have very different needs. And so it's important that you actually chat to the care team and ensure that you're getting what every individual needs. The next slide, please. So what to include? I look specifically today, I'm just going to look at the requirements for balloon gastrostomy tubes. So when we have a look at the next slide, we're looking at the MIC-G and the MIC-G bolus balloon retained gastrostomy tubes. The difference between the two of them is how many gastric ports that they have. So either one for a MIC-G bolus or 2 for a MIC-G. And the MIC-G with the 2 ports are typically used when a medication is given during a feed. So the balloons typically last between 1 and 8 months, depending on a variety of factors, including the type of medication, the gastric pH, the water volume used to inflate the balloon, and the care and the maintenance of the gastrostomy tube. So many of the hospitals and the residential care facilities in WA will actually change those MIC-Gs in patients routinely every 3 months. And it's essential that every individual has at least 1 or 2 spares that are available to them. If the gastrostomy tube fails, for whatever reason, that individual is unable to receive the nutritional support that they require. So it's also important to note that once there's nothing in that stoma, that it can actually start to close within an hour. So having that spare MIC-G means a patient can have a new gastrostomy tube inserted in a timely manner, and they're not forced to attend the emergency department. Now, on the next slide, you're going to see the accessories that you possibly may need. So you may require a side loading clamp or the nasogastric, nasointestinal and extension sets. And those extension sets, while they're designed for nasogastric tubes, we have a number of people that will actually use them to extend the tube. So if it's not long enough, they'll attach that, just give them a little bit more length. So on the next slide, you'll have a look at what's required for an annual quote. So sorry, next slide, please. So when you're getting your annual quotes for a MIC-G or a MIC-G bolus, be sure to include the 4 to 6 MIC-Gs as a minimum, and then in the accessories such as the clamps or the extension sets that may be required. Now, when we look at the Mickey gastric low profile tubes on the next slide, the balloons, again, similar to the MIC-Gs, are typically going to last between 1 and 8 months. And again, it's determined by things such as the medication, the gastric pH, and the care and maintenance of the tube. Again, patients cared for within the public health and residential care facilities will often have them changed routinely every 3 months. And again, it's paramount that you have at least 1 or 2 spares available to you at all. On the next slide, you're going to see the extension sets. So the Mickey extension sets come in a variety of lengths, including a 5 centimetre one for medication delivery, and a 30 centimetre and a 60 centimetre length, as well as there's been 2 different options for the connection end, either the straight or a right angled. And it's really important that you understand that these are a disposable item and they should be washed after every single use with warm soapy water, rinsed, and then left to dry in a cool, dry place. But they need to be replaced every 2 weeks. If they're in a very humid environment, or for example, there's a blended feed that's going through the tube, then they're very likely that they may need to be replaced more often than that because they can be difficult to clean. We wouldn't want to be eating off a dirty or a mouldy plate, and neither should our enterally fed patients. Now, the next slide. In terms of potential accessories for a Mickey, you may wish to consider including a Mickey stoma measuring device. It's really important that the Mickey low profile tubes fit well, and not uncommon for patients to put weight on or to lose weight. So let's face it, children are growing, adults are getting healthier and putting weight on, and often it's a desired outcome. But if the Mickey's too loose, or you can get leakage of the gastric content, and if it's too tight, you can get complications such as buried bumper syndrome. The Mickey should be assessed regularly, and it needs measured and the best possible fit. So you may need to change the Mickey as time goes on. On the next slide, you're going to see the NDIS annual quote. So for a Mickey patient, it should include, again, 4 to 6 Mickeys per year, as well as 6 boxes of each type of Mickey extension set that is required. So, for example, if somebody was to need a 5 centimetre extension set for medications and a 30 centimetre straight bolus extension set for a blended feed, and a 60 centimetre right-angled extension set for an overnight continuous feed, you would need to include 6 boxes of each of those in an annual quote. But if they just used a 30 centimetre bolus, you would only include 6 boxes of those. Additionally, you would include any accessories such as a stoma measuring device. So on the next slide, what else would you need? And then if we go ahead, you'll see that the enteral feeding clogs. So enteral feeding clogs can be a significant issue for feeding tube patients. We want to be ensuring that the delivery of nutrition, hydration, and medications to these patients is uninterrupted. Clog zapper is used in certain types of blockages, primarily in enteral feeding formulation clogs, which can commonly occur in enteral fed patients. So there was a study that was done which compared flushing with water versus flushing with pancreatic enzymes in feeding tubes. And the incidence of clogging was 23.5% for water versus 2.6% in the clog zapper group. So the ingredients work together to make an enzyme cocktail, and that enzyme cocktail loosens, breaks down, and dislodges the clogs. So it can be used in any type of enteral feeding tube, whether that's a PEG, a balloon retained gastrostomy tube, or a nasogastric tube. And it's a product that you may want to consider either prophylactically or to eliminate the enteral feeding clogs rather than having to replace the enteral feeding tube or presenting to ED. On the next slide, you're going to see the Farrell valve bags. So the Farrell valve bags can relieve the symptoms of gastric distension and bloating, which can lead to feeding intolerances and can be the source of a lot of pain and discomfort for people. So they allow for continuous feeding of excess gas while still retaining any medication and enteral formula. It's a closed system which prevents exposure to gastric content and eliminates the need for open system syringe venting. And there are 30 in a box, so they need to be changed every 24 hours. So if you were doing a quote, you would ensure that you included 13 cartons per annum. So on the next slide about how the next section that I'll talk about is how to give yourself the best chance of getting that funding. So you'll see it's really, sorry, next slide. You'll see that it's really important to keep records. When was the gastrostomy tube changed? Why was it changed? Did they have any enteral feeding clogs or medication clogs? Did the balloon fail? Did the patient put weight on or lose weight? Was there a lot of gastric distension, or was the patient uncomfortable? This is the type of thing that builds up the evidence that you're going to need. So while I've given you some typical uses for things like the MIC and the Mickey, there may be very good reasons why you might need more. So for example, has an individual got some behavioural issues where they're actually pulling out the gastrostomy tube? Have they had some significant weight gain or some significant weight loss? Are they experiencing a lot of medication clogs? And as a result, they may need more than the typical 4 to 6. If this is all documented, then you can produce the evidence to why this particular patient needs 10 tubes rather than the typical 4 to 6. You can also use evidence from the product brochures and information for use things, and enlist the help of your care team. Make sure that the products that such as clog zapper or Farrell valve bags are included in your care plans or in your nursing guidelines. If you can produce the why to things, you are far more likely to get the funding that is required for that patient. And what we want is best possible patient outcomes and best possible quality of life for all of our tubies. You could go on to the next slide, please. So there are various resources available to you, like the patient care guides and like the IFUs, but also feel free to contact anybody in our team. I've just put my own name and number up there, but I'm happy to put you in touch with anyone from one of the other states. We are here to guide you and to help you, and it's our job. So don't feel like you're, reach out whenever you can. We're here for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiona. That was very insightful. Okay, so we've heard from our speakers, how do we put this all together to get that dollar amount that your participant actually needs to sort of get by in a 12-month period, so we don't fall short, and which ends up causing bigger problems, either wasting time, which is money, or trips to the hospital. So this is where we employ the efforts of the surgical house team, in particular our customer relationship manager, Renee Holdaway, who sort of composes and works with the dietitians to put that quote together. And she's also backed up by our very strong customer service team, who are all trained on the products, and we have a very close links to all our manufacturers. That's why we sort of know, and Renee has a long history of doing this, so she knows sort of, she talks regularly to the hospital dietitians, the manufacturers, so she has a very good grounding of what is needed. So I love doing my job, but I guess if I wasn't doing this job, I'd probably be a maths teacher. So I want to give everyone a bit of a maths lessons today, which just puts everything into perspective. So you might know this, but I thought I'd just go over it anyhow. So the NDIS is currently sitting at almost 700,000 participants. But of those 700,000, only 30% actually have a need for sort of that complex healthcare consumables, whether it's continence, wound care, enteral feeding, etc. That 200,000 and all that consumable spend only makes up 3% of the total NDIS budget. When you put in the enteral feeding tube fed customer, which is less, and this is less than 25% of those participants, it's far, far less. We're talking now of less than 1% of the total NDIS spend goes on enteral feeding products. It's more like 0.2 or 0.3%. And here we are, where we have people pushing back on the amount of Mickey buttons you can use, or this and that. It's just ridiculous, so and the one thing that is very important is the tipping point, or the failure point, if we don't get this right. And we'll go through, and this, what we typically see from Lina to Renee, and I'll just show you what comes in from a typical sort of a quotation of an email. So this is a very large quote that was requested by Lina. So she'll send through an email to Renee. It'll be all the list of all the items that participant needs for the next 12 months. Renee will get this information. She'll look at it. She'll compare it to manufacturers' recommendations, to historicals, if there's going to be a freight where the person lives, and she'll come back and and she'll either complete the quote, or she'll go back to Lina with sort of some suggestions for little tweaks. And we've seen in Lina's presentation that sometimes those tweaks end up getting the participant more money. Then we end up with the final sort of dollar amount, and this is how it's presented to the dietitian. So you'll see in this quotation here, there's the feeding, the actual feeding from Nutricia, there's the Mickey buttons, there's a free arm in there, etc. The final cost is $26,000. Now, this is a very large quote for an enteral feeding participant. Normally, a typical quote in this field is between $7,000 and $12,000. So it might seem like a lot. And as Fiona said, sometimes the patient might need 4 Mickey buttons a year, but we'll quote 6 because you have 2. One might burst. If one bursts and they've run short, what happens then? How do you get it? We've got to go to the hospital, we've got to do this. It just takes time. But the one thing that we do is we always go on manufacturer's recommendation. Now, when you buy a new car, they tell you you can't drive it too fast for the first 1,000 kilometers. You got to use a certain type of fuel. You got to get a service every 6 months. And what do? We do it because, hey, it's a new car. It's a big investment. We follow that to a T. We go and get ourselves a new puppy dog. Vet says, You got to worm it once a month. You got to flea it once a month. What do? We do it because the people who make the flea medication say once a month. We follow it because we don't want to harm our dog. But now we've got real people involved, and we're starting to see pushbacks about, oh, let's scrimp and save on a bit of this and a bit of that. So we're talking about peanuts in relation to the NDIS spend. Go after it, get what you need. We'll help you along the journey. And then with that supporting letter, as Lina was talking about, we give you the evidence, and hopefully that produces the right dollar amount, right? So your participant has the right budget to fulfill their needs for the next 12 months. And obviously with that nursing service on top, the chances of going to hospital is heavily reduced. And those of you who know, one day in hospital, while it's stressful for the families and the participant, costs the Australian taxpayer $7,600 a day. How many days you have to stay in hospital before that budget for the year looks completely insignificant? So that is the real reason why getting it right matters. So that's why I want to end off there. We now come to the next part of our webinar, is our question time. So we've got all our speakers online. So I've got some questions here that I'll sort of shoot away. So the first one here is for Lina. It comes from, I just wanted to thank everyone first as well. Thanks for all your great talks then. First question is for Lina. This comes from Danielle. She's a dietitian in New South Wales. Great question, because I've never heard this being answered before. Any tips to help increase dietitian funding? Have recently had a case where a participant was only given 6 hours per year, previously given at least 12 to 14 hours. Report addressed and reasonable and necessary criteria, and made clear the risks of lack of dietitian support. How would you tackle that one, Lina? That's a bit of a beauty.
Thanks, Danielle. Look, I'm definitely not going to stand here and say every single one of my advocacy letters have been completely approved by NDIS. I've had massive pushback as well. So I hear you, Danielle. Thank you for your question. I would probably say that you're particularly talking about dietitian hours. What I've tried to build in is just to make sure that in my letters, I've got a nice little meaty, juicy paragraph going, this is how many times I've seen this person in the last year. These are the improvements they've made because of my input. These are the goals that we've reached, and these are the ones we haven't yet reached, which is where my involvement will continue, is needed. And the other tip would be, I'm sure you know this, using super simple language. So some of my letters are like, if they don't receive this clinical support, they are at risk of dehydration, malnutrition, and which could lead to death. So I've actually used super simple, and I'm not going to say dramatic, it's real, because if someone doesn't, we all have seen that, I've seen that client that has not had any dietitian support with their feeding tube for 5+ years, and they've come to me and they're not doing well. We all know about these clinical cases. So I think just being really spending some time, rather than on the quote, delegate that out and spend your time in that little juicy paragraph saying what you've been doing and why you're so important, and then using that simple human language of the risk if you don't get involved. Yeah, but I'm sure there's others out there that have brilliant tips, but yeah.
Okay, thanks for that, Lina. That's a great response. I mean, I said it's something that don't cross my path on a daily basis. So yeah, it's good to know more about those sort of issues. I have one now, which is probably for Fiona. So I'm not sure if Fiona can hear me properly, or I'll give it to and I know Lina wants to tackle this one too. So I have a patient who has a MIC-G and is very active and gets in the way. How would you go about changing it to a Mickey? So maybe we'll let Lina go first, and then we'll see if Fiona wants to add to it.
So if you've got a MIC-G and you want to change it to a Mickey-G, it's as simple as using the measuring device and ascertaining the length of the stoma, and then ordering the appropriate Mickey-G from Surgical House or your supplier. And if you want any further information, then don't be be happy to reach out to one of us and we'll walk you through it and send you the details in the video.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. And any add to that, Lina?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually really love this question. Who was it from? Did you say Rachel?
I'm not sure, to be
Not
honest.
sure.
So
Okay.
there's
Whoever
they're,
it's
they're
from.
screaming through, so I've got so many
Oh,
questions.
right. Well, I love it, and I think it's a brilliant question, and I think it's the exact type of question NDIS dietitians should be asking. So I love that. So Fiona's given us the practical approach, which is measuring the stoma length. Dietitians, that's not something we do. Okay, so that's something a nurse would do or a doctor would do. So if I've got a client where I feel they would benefit from a low profile button, number one, if they have a specialist that is regularly involved in their care and is a gastroenterologist, they're the person I'd go to. I'd write a letter to their practice and say, this is what I think they would benefit from, a low profile button. Can you help get this sorted? And then the doctor will then do all the stoma measurements or their practice nurse. They would probably come back to me and say, we need to order this. And then I would liaise with the NDIS coordinator to order in the right tube. But yeah, I would liaise with the gastroenterologist. If they don't have a specialist, I would go to the GP, write a letter to the GP and say, this person needs a low profile button. Can you refer to a gastroenterologist? If both those two fail, I would then contact the hospital that inserted the initial tube. And normally the dietitian departments are the ones I go to because I've got lots of friends on the inside and they're awesome. So I would go, hey, dietitians, this patient used to be a patient of yours in the hospital, and this is what I think. Can you tell me where I can go in the hospital, who I can contact to make this happen? And normally, to tell you the truth, these sorts of advocacies take me like 4 bloody months, if not more, to actually make it happen for a client. But if they have a specialist, it happens quicker. If their GP is super switched on, it happens quicker. But if none of those are available, yeah, it takes a while. But great question.
No, exactly. Oh, thanks, Lina. One for Kirsten now. So, and this is a great question as well. So I guess a lot of people, when sometimes I go and meet mum and dad in the home, their stress is all about at what point, if the Mickey button's looking not right or bursting or there's something, they're obviously panic on the time. The nursing service is something that is just a lifesaver. Once a nursing service is received, how long does it typically take for a nutrition nurse to make contact?
Yeah, look, it's a really rapid service, obviously depending on the location of the patient. But for metro areas, patients can be seen within, 1 to 2 days of receiving a referral. And again, we do quite a comprehensive clinical assessment on what needs to take place and what supports are required to be offered. And we do work in very close collaboration with dietitians on that front. So, normally once a referral has been received, it will be scanned and triaged by our Nurse Connect service. And then we will be reaching out to the participant or their caregivers or anyone within that circle of care that requires our support. So it's pretty rapid. But we can also connect virtually as well. So for the more remote locations and those patients that are living on, very remote farms and in remote areas of Australia, again, as long as they've got an internet connection, we can actually connect with them in the same capacity as what we would do face-to-face. So.
Oh, that's amazing. Thanks for that, Kirsten. This one comes from Joshua. I'm not sure, maybe Lina can tackle it first. Are there any longer-term NJ tubes you recommend? What is the max time you usually see people use these till being replaced? I see people who often need a private trial of an NJ tube and would like to know what manufacturers are officially saying that their tubes last for when placed.
Yes, awesome question, Joshua. I'm assuming these clients are not NDIS. Some of them might be, but I've had short-term trials of NG or NJ. Yes, the standard hospital stocked ones are normally, they last 4 to 6 weeks and they've got to be changed. But I've recently discovered there are NG tubes that can sit in for 6 months. For the life of me, I can't remember the name of the company that makes them. They're not usually stocked in hospitals, and they're normally super special tubes that you've got to order in. But I'm going to find out, Joshua, can you email me on admin@tubedietitian.com, and I can send you my information about that. I've got to just dig it up. But yes, great question.
Yeah, well, thanks, Joshua, and thanks for answering, Lina. This one also comes in, I'm not sure, anonymous, but I have a patient that might be a good candidate for a Farrell bag. How would I go about getting some and upskilling the carers? Over to you, Fiona, on that one.
Sorry, just taking myself off mute there.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so the Farrell bags are a fabulous product. Reach out to your territory manager and we can set up a time either via Teams or face-to-face. And what we can do is go out and do some education, make sure people know how to use it, how to set it up, etc. But also what we'll do is actually provide them with a few days worth of Farrell bags. They're not a cheap product, so we'll give you sort of 3 or 4 days worth of product that you can use, and then you can see whether it's actually going to work or not. If it's not going to work, no harm done. If it is going to work, it will make a massive difference to that person's quality of life.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Fiona. Yeah, so yeah, those samples is obviously key, because as Lina mentioned before, you don't want to spend money and you want to know what's going on before you actually commit to something. Okay, this is from Rachel. This one's for Lina. Love to find out more how you advocate and prove that a blender is reasonable and necessary for clients wanting to go down the BTF pathway. Thank you.
Yeah, I love this question too. Yeah, you guys are awesome. You're really thinking, we're all on the same wavelength, and this is what's awesome about these sessions. So thanks, Surgical House, for having me on this platform. So Rachel, yes, I normally have really specific detail on that. They were on this formula, commercial formula, and it didn't work for XYZ reasons, whether it's GI symptoms. We tried for 3 weeks or 3 months or however long we tried, and these were the symptoms they had, which impacted on their ability to engage in community, their well-being, their health. And so I've normally explicitly give detail of the formula, commercial formula trials we've made, and this is why we're going down the path of BTF. If it's for personal or social reasons, again, I just make it really explicit that whilst there are several commercial formulas out on the market, the reason this client's choosing to do homemade blends is for this particular reason. And I've been a part of their trial, and I've monitored, and I agree, and all that sort of stuff. So I just, again, in super simple language though, like nothing clinically dramatic, really simple language, I just kind of go, this is the real situation and why they need a blender. I had one client as well who I needed to advocate not only for a home blender, but also a portable blender, because she's so active in the community. She eats orally, but then if she can't finish her full meal, she wants to just chuck it in a little NutriBullet portable blender and then put it through the peg. And so then I had to give really specifics that she goes out on Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays at these times to join book club or social gatherings with friends. And this is how we're going to tackle her nutrition. And this is why a portable blender, such as a NutriBullet or whatever, is really helpful. So I do give them the benefit of the doubt, and I go into detail, but I make it really simple language that my husband, who's a non-health professional, can understand. So good that get someone else to read your letters.
That's exactly right. And we've seen that. I know we've done that before with other consumable needs. You got to really dumb it down and make it sound, and it gets through. The message gets through. So we've got one here from Marita. It's for Lina. What would you quote for a client on maintenance feed? Nil current issues, minimum dietitian reviews required per year, funding hours needed, ?
Oh man, Marita, this is great. But if you ask me every day, I'll have a different answer for you. But I know what you mean. And I've got a lot of those clients who are actually doing really well nutritionally, and they don't need monthly reviews. Look, mind you, I still get emails from their coordinator to attend a care meeting or to draft a new plan, quote, and letter of support. They might email me and shoot me, go, hey, I've just started a bout of antibiotics and now I've got pretty bad diarrhea. What do you, so they might be stable, but I think when you're doing the quote, expect that you're going to be called with it, you know, throughout the year for those sorts of things. And it's definitely happened to me. I mean, again, I'm going to give you a really rough range of what I think, but if you ask me tomorrow, it'll be completely different. I'd probably say for the stable hennas, maybe between 6 to 9 hours a year, I would still be quoting. And then for the unstables, I'd be going obviously way higher, like 10 to 20 hours. But again, my numbers differ and it's really individual, and you've got to ask, and how are their social supports is another really big question. I've got one client who's super stable clinically, but every other month they've got a new carer, right? So I'm being called on to train the carer on the feeding regimen. So I'm not doing the clinical, but I'm doing a lot of the other stuff, the admin training stuff. So yes, be super mindful and quote for the worst.
Oh, yeah, exactly, 100%. Now, one thing that we noticed too, and it's just an unfortunate circumstance in Australia, is that people where English is their second language don't seem to get the right support, or they don't know who to ask, so they normally fall short of getting the correct support coordination, or sometimes don't even have a dietitian. So, question for you, Kirsten, is: can nutrition nurses support NDIS participants if they don't have a dietitian?
Yes, look, we certainly can, but we would strongly recommend that they seek support from a dietitian. Sometimes we do find that GPs will assume a certain type of responsibility over nutrition plans, but yeah, look, our guidance is really to steer them down towards the dietetic pathway for that specialist nutrition advice and guidance and support, you know, they're on in with their plans. So yeah, it's a conversation that certainly does start, you know, once they do reach out to us.
Oh, exactly. Thanks for that. That's important to know. Okay, now this question, I think it's for everyone. Might even get Renee involved in this one. This is from Lyndall. This is a beauty. When asking for an equipment quote for a pediatric client, is there any additional information you need apart from the list of equipment? Maybe start with you, Lina, and maybe we can all sort of put our heads together. Yeah.
Is there any other, sorry, can you just repeat the last bit?
Sorry, is there any other additional information you need apart from the list of equipment?
How often they change the equipment or their usage of the equipment is so important. And Renee, it saves Renee a lot of time, a lot of back and forth. So make sure you ask the patient. And as I said, if someone's using homemade blends, they probably need more extension sets, you know, for their low profile button than someone who's doing commercial formula that might not stain. Beetroot stains, carrot stains, and unfortunately tube feeding equipment is not made for homemade blends yet. So yes, you've got to understand, go by the manufacturer's recommendations, but also include that personal usage.
And I guess, I suppose, best guess, I suppose, for just as evidence, if you can include like an NDIS number that we can have and put that on the quote, then that way when it's submitted, it's relating back to your client or to the person that you're submitting the plan in for. So just some basic information that will help tie the quote into your client.
Very, very true. Thank you. Thanks, Renee. Thanks, Lina. Okay, we've got two questions I'll get through quickly. One for Lina. How do you this is from Georgia, dietitian in Victoria. How do you justify specialised formulas, considerations for PBS formulas?
Well, this is probably more a pediatric dietitian question, because I know some of the pediatric formulas or powders are on the PBS. I'm going to did you say it's from Rachel? If Rachel,
it's from Georgia.
Sorry, Rachel, I keep picking your name. Georgia, can you email me? I've got contacts of some incredible pediatric dietitians that will be able to guide you a little bit more than I can for that question. Email me admin@tubedietitian.com and I'll link you. There's some amazing dietitians out there. So, yeah.
Awesome, thanks, Lynn. We'll get one more, and then all the other ones we'll get back to them via emails. This one's for you, Fiona. Where would you get copies of evidence like patient care guides and IFUs?
So great question. We have a website, tubefed.com.au, which make sure you go to the Australian website so you're getting localized content. And on there, you're going to find all of your IFUs, all your patient care guides. There are videos animated videos on how to change things, what to do, etc. And lots of information and videos from other tubies. It's a really, really great website, and I'd encourage you all to have a look because it's patients and carers love it.
Thanks, Fiona. Yeah, exactly. Use the tools that have been provided by the manufacturers because they are very useful, and probably sometimes they're underutilized, but they're all there. So yeah, and we have a lot of them on our website as well at surgicalhouse.com.au. Okay, so I think we'll get to other questions via email, but thanks for all those answers. They were fantastic. We now come to the fun part. We're going to give away Lina's book. This is happily donated by Lina. Your Tube is the title, A Guide to Nutrition Through a Feeding Tube, published in November 2023 and available on Amazon. Let's spin it. Where did it stop? Melinda Nelson. Well done, Melinda. You're the proud owner of Lina's book, Your Tube, and we'll get that sorted out and get it out to you ASAP. So it's a great read, so well done. So I guess that's almost a wrap now. I guess I just wanted to add to that if you want to send quotes to Surgical House, you want to sort of inquire, this is a free service we offer. Obviously, we would love you to then purchase the products through Surgical House, but if you don't want to use us, you want to buy it from elsewhere, still come to us. We definitely can help you. All I say to you is, if you're going to go somewhere else, use another one-stop shop provider because it just saves time. It's a lot easier, and build that relationship with your supplier because it does make things easier. And we know that when we have a great relationship with our dietitians, we bend over backwards to help. So build that relationship. Apart from myself, we've got Cassandra Hamilton in looks after New South Wales and Queensland. You contact her; she's on the phone straight away. She's an amazing. But everything obviously comes back to Renee. She's our customer relationship manager. She does all the technical side to our business. She links up with the website, new products. If it's not on our website, speak to her because she can go find out if we can source it. Normally we can. She'll do the quotes for it. They're pretty promptly done. And if she can't do them, we've got our 8-strong customer service team who are all trained on the products as well. So reach out to Surgical House. We're here to help, as we understand that you've also got your preferred provider. But this service is free and it's something that please utilize. So we want to make sure that the tubies out there get the best outcome. That's our main priority. Everything else will follow after that. So obviously stay in touch with us. We're very active on social media. We're a pretty fun lot. I'm pretty much here just for the fun part. So look on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're doing stuff all the time. We've got events coming up left, right and centre in Melbourne, Sydney and Perth. So yeah, just follow us. And any last questions, any last comments from Lina, Fiona, Kirsten?
No, I put it in the chat. But thanks for dialing in, and thanks Surgical House for the platform.
No, thank you. Fiona?
No, thank you all very much. We do have a core flow product that actually is a nasal long-term tube. If someone wants to reach out to me, I'd be happy to talk to you about that, Joshua. Thanks.
Thanks, Fiona. And Kirsten?
Oh, look, it's been a great pleasure presenting today on which has been my very first webinar. So I'm really happy to be involved.
Anyway, thanks, Kirsten. Thanks all our team. That was great. Thanks all our speakers today. And thank you all for attending. We hope you got something out of our webinar. We will be back with more webinars in the future. So for now, big thanks from Surgical House and enjoy the rest of your day.